This 2023 NFC South season-long player props edition of the Propcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by our Patreon. Score exclusive perks, content, and contests, including our NFL win totals contest with a $1,000 first place prize. Join today at sportsgamblingpodcast.com/Patreon. We're also brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy is offering you a chance to win $15 million in prizes with Best Ball Mania 4. Use promo code SGPN at Underdog Fantasy for a 100% deposit bonus of up to $100. And we're also brought to you by DraftKings Sportsbook. Download the app now and use promo code SGP. New customers can score $200 in bonus bets instantly when they bet just $5 on any college football bet, only on DraftKings Sportsbook with promo code SGP. Welcome, everyone, to the Propcast, part of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. It is Monday, August the 28th, currently 5:08 on the East Coast, to get into our seventh division for the upcoming NFL season for our season-long player props. And today we're going to be discussing the good old NFC South today. This division, I will say, it has flipped over the last couple seasons. We'll get into that in a minute. Obviously, youth movement and a lot of quarterback changes, but we'll discuss that as we kind of go through the propcast here with our player props. But I got my guys here with me as usual. First, the hardest working man in the sports media space. It's Rod Villagomez. Rod, how's it hanging, my man?
I am happy to be home. As those of you who listen to the NASCAR Gambling Podcast know, I was away for about half a week last week, and it's just nice to be back in the friendly confines of this office and talking NFL with you guys. I mean, it's nothing says Monday than the Propcast.
Ever so closer to the NFL season. I'm starting to smell the green grass there, Rod. But yeah, we're getting close, my man. But also joining us here, you guys know him. He is the prop god. It's Crispy Cap. And Chris, how's it feeling, my man? How you doing this Monday?
What's up, What's up, Rod? Like Rod said, man, excited to be back. Had the weekend off. And like you said, the NFL season is slowly but surely getting here, man. This is Propcast number 7. So we only have, we'll be done with 7 at the end of this episode and only have 1 left. And the good thing about being done, even though it's really good to be able to talk to you guys about it, is we get that much closer to football. So excited for the show today. And let's get it going,
Yeah, man, preseason wrapped up last night on Sunday between my Texans and the Saints. So that just means we're about 10 days away, maybe a little less than 10 days away from the NFL season. The first game of the regular season that kicks off next Thursday night between the Lions and the Chiefs. But hey, we still have some business to take care of here, giving out hopefully some more winners to our listeners. And like I mentioned, today it's going to be the NFC South we're going to be discussing here for our season-long player props. And guys, like I alluded to before, this division is going through a youth movement, especially at the quarterback position for at least 3 out of the 4 teams, right? We have number 1 overall pick in this last year's NFL draft, and Bryce Young, who's going to be taking over for the quarterback position for the Carolina Panthers. Desmond Ridder has been officially named the starting quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons. He did play in the final 4 weeks of the regular season last year for the Atlanta Falcons, taking over for Marcus Mariota. Derek Carr comes over from the Las Vegas Raiders to be the quarterback for the New Orleans Saints. And the Buccaneers are probably going to go through maybe a little bit of a quarterback carousel, starting with Baker Mayfield, but it feels like we may see some Kyle Trask sooner rather than later if Baker Mayfield does struggle for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But just kind of looking at the division as a whole, there's still a lot of great young talent in this division, guys. But Chris, let me start with you before we do get to our player props here. Any players that you're excited to watch out for in this division? Because like we mentioned, there's a lot of great talent. Obviously, I believe the biggest name as far as a youth movement goes is probably Bijan Robinson out of the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, Bijan is a really, really good one. It actually correlates with one of my player props that we'll talk about in a second.
We'll save that for later then.
We'll say that for later. But I mean, it's a lot. This is actually a really talented division. There's a lot of talent there, whether it's some of the younger players like the quarterbacks that you just mentioned, or it's just maybe it's somebody like like Mike Thomas getting a chance to be healthy. He's only played 10 games over the last 2 seasons, so seeing him back healthy, Derek Carr coming over, as a I wouldn't say elite, but a solid, quarterback to be in this division as well. Someone that can throw the ball down the field, and we can look for some big plays. Olave from the Saints. I'm interested to see how Chris performs in his second year. So yeah, it's a lot. Bryce Young we didn't mention yet, but I'm interested to see how he pans out down there in Carolina. So it's a lot of interesting talent in this division for sure. That I'm excited for.
Rod, thoughts on the youth movement here in this division?
Well, and it leads to the range of outcomes for this division being very, very much polar opposites. You could have a very strong division with a lot of young talent, or a young division that just is struggling because they don't have the necessary experience to make this exciting. So, I mean, we saw last season, right? This division was really close anyways, record-wise and really just talent-wise altogether, right? It could be that way, but it could either be that they're another struggling, barely over 500 division, or you could have two or even three teams kind of break away from the pack. Sorry, Tampa, you guys aren't even close to being ready for this, but you could have three teams kind of breaking away from the pack and being solid contenders, maybe not for the NFC crown, but at least competing with each other, hard all season long to try to make this a more interesting division than it was last year.
Yeah, last season, like you mentioned, before we get to our player props here, the winning team was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with a record of 8-9, and the last three teams in that division were all tied at 7-10. So something we may see similar to what happened last season in the NFC South. So, gentlemen, let's kick it off here with our first player props. Chris, why don't you lead us off, my man? What's your first player prop for this NFC South division?
So we just talked a little bit about Bijan, and I'm looking at his quarterback. Like we talked about the quarterback controversy in this, with all these young bodies. I'm looking at Desmond Ritter. I'm gonna go under. I'm gonna go under on his passing yards. The number is already kind of low. It's only 2,600, but it is minus 105, so we're getting pretty good value there over on DK. And it's we mentioned one of the key facts already. It's the reliance of Bijan Robinson, right? Like this dude is, if we know what the Falcons' offense was last year, I don't expect for it to change too much. And I'm not saying that he doesn't, have some progression. Typically, those quarterbacks going from year number one to year number two, they do tend to make some progression sitting behind Mariota last year. Like you said, in the start, he did, finish off the year, four starts at the end. In those 4 games though, last season, and you can call this, maybe this is just the front office trying to protect them and the coaching staff trying to protect them, but he only he threw beyond the first down marker only 36% of the time last year. And to put that in perspective, that ranks 41 out of 47 quarterbacks. So we're talking about dink and dunks, small chunks of yards, screens, dump downs to the running back. And I think we kind of see a little bit more of that this year. Atlanta also passed for just 2,700 yards last year. They didn't even get 27. It's like 2,699, which was the second fewest in the league, behind only the Bears. And I think we see some more of that this season. I think even with Desmond taking more snaps, and like I said, this being his second year, the coaching staff still is going to protect him. I think they're going to lean on other ways to score outside of him passing the ball down the field for big yardage. And the guy can scramble. We know that he made a lot of plays with his legs when he was in college. So I think we see, a little bit of a conservative offense, and I think that they struggle, outside of London, outside of Pitts to get a lot of receiving yards, and they're just going to run the ball a lot more than any other team. So give me his under 26, pretty much 2,600 passing yards over on DK minus 105. So not drinking too much juice at all.
Yeah, I think it's that last point that you made about this Falcons team, which is probably going to be what leads to Desmond Ritter not throwing for a lot of yards this season, is going to be that running game, right? Arthur Smith coming over from the Titans from 2 seasons ago. And that they were a run-first team over there in Titans. They still are with Derrick Henry, but maybe they'd open up this season. But I think that's kind of translated over to this Atlanta Falcons team under Arthur Smith. But you have 3 legitimate guys that can run the football here, that backfield for the Atlanta Falcons, with obviously Bijan, we talked about, with Tyler Algier and also Cordell Patterson. Patterson probably just goes back to the wide receiving group. But again, he's always still a threat to come out of that backfield to run the football, whether it's on jet sweeps or even just lining up in the backfield like he did for majority of the season last year. So I was looking at this one as well. I feel like one of you two would at least have this one. So I'm in agreement here, 100% on Desmond Ridder here. Rod, thoughts on Desmond Ridder for this upcoming year?
Well, how about two of us had that one?
There we go.
I definitely had this one as well. Definitely taking the under on this one, exactly the way Chris laid it out. But I'll also add on this, he may not even be the starting quarterback all season. Taylor Heineke is right behind him. And we know Taylor has established himself, right, in Washington to be a guy that can come in and at least bridge some gaps, right? Ridder starts to stumble. Ridder starts to have a bad start. They're going to flies wasn't in front. They're gonna pull the trigger on him real quick and have Tyler line up and have this as his team. So I definitely don't know that he's gonna last all season long. And if he doesn't, that under 26 is going to. I mean, on face value, all he needs is 152 yards a game, right, to average to be able to get to 2,600. He does have Kyle Pitts. He does have Drake London. He will have Cordero Patterson back, right? Even a swing pass for Patterson can turn into some serious yak yards. But again, whether or not he's still the starting quarterback on week 18 is why or how this whole prop hinges. And I don't think he's going to get there, honestly. So I think that, and then he may miss games in the middle of the season too. We haven't seen a full season out of him yet either for obvious reasons. But again, 2,600, it seems like it's an attainable number, even to a guy who threw for almost 700 yards in 4 games. You're like, well, that's not much more, right? If he doesn't play all 18, he's not hitting this mark.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. You also bring up that I don't think that he'll last the full season. I don't think Atlanta would have brought in a legitimate backup quarterback like in Tyler Heineke if they didn't, if they thought that Desmond Ridder would be there for the entire season. But yeah, you guys make great points. I was already leaning towards the under here for Desmond Ridder. So yeah. Player prop number 1 for both Chris and Rod. That's going to be the under on Desmond Ridder.
You got it this time, Chris. You got it first this
time.
I
finally got one. I finally beat you to one, Rod. I love that we had the same notes, though. And one thing I want to mention, Rod mentioned it, and I want to just piggyback off of it. The contract that my guy, Mr. Tyler Heineke, got from the Atlanta Falcons is actually the second most for any backup quarterback. So they, like Rod said, they didn't bring him there just to sit, if they're struggling. And you think about the division, you mentioned this at the top, but you think about this division, they were, a win away from going to the playoffs because all of the teams finished so closely, right? Every team had 7 wins outside of Tampa, who had 1 more win. So, that can really change things if if the competition is kind of where we kind of all expect it to be and looks like last year at all.
I mean, look, there's a lot of hype coming around this team coming up for this upcoming season, right? I mean, there's a lot of young, great talent like we've talked about. And again, like you mentioned, if they're in a hunt for the division or even a playoff spot, Desmond Ridder isn't, performing well. Tyler Heineke has proven himself to, carry a team into the playoffs like he did with the Commanders. So, yeah, it'll be definitely interesting to see how this kind of quarterback, at least for how the season pans out for Desmond Ridder for this upcoming season. All right, guys, before we get over to my first player prop here, let me tell everyone where you can find these player props and get down on some of these player props. And that's going to be over at DraftKings. And also, week 0 of college football is in the books. We are officially on to week 1 of college football. And if you're a college football fan, I mean, all of us are. We all love football. Are you ready for week 1? DraftKings is hooking you up with a can't-miss offer to start the season strong. This week, new customers that bet just $5 on any college football game can score $200 in bonus bets instantly. Anything can happen in college football. Your team could go from unranked to dynasty mode in just a couple years. Change comes fast. That's the one thing that's a lock, and that's a great offers from DraftKings. Life's more fun when you're in on the action. Download the DraftKings app now and use promo code SGP. New customers can score $200 in bonus bets instantly when they bet just $5 on college football. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code SGP. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details and state-specific responsible gambling resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply. Terms at sportsbook.draftkings.com/football terms. All right, gentlemen, I am going to get over to my first player prop, and it's going to be another quarterback prop. And continuing on the under train here, I'm going to go with Bryce Young under 3,450 and a half, I think was the number that I saw. Yes, for Bryce Young for this upcoming season. And I think that number one, to kind of look at this Carolina Panthers team, I'm not very much sold on their wide receiving group, right? We saw we talked about the trade between the Bears and the Panthers. I definitely got rid of or traded, I should say, their best wide receiver, DJ Moore, over to the Chicago Bears as part of that trade for the number one overall pick. But you have to kind of look at that, right? They've got Adam Thielen in free agency. Thielen has been healthy, right? He's a year older. And then you also have Terrence Marshall Jr., who was already dealing with some type of injuries within the training camp going into, I think, over the past couple of weeks. I think it was a shoulder injury for him as well. But I think there's a lot of pressure on Bryce Young to get to lead this team. We talked a lot about quarterbacks that get drafted that I firmly believe that they should sit out a year and learn from some of the veterans in the league. I think it worked out well from Patrick Mahomes. I think it's going to work out very well for Jordan Love. But I think there's going to be a lot of growing pains that come in with this team with the Carolina Panthers, right? You have Frank Reich as the head coach. I'm not the biggest fan of Frank Reich. I think that he can get the job done, but I think there's a lack of weapons right now for Bryce Young coming into the season. You talk about a number of 3,450 and a half yards. Sure, there's been 10, 11, 12 quarterbacks that have done it in their rookie season, but I just don't think there's enough for this Carolina Panthers team. I really think that they're going to be involved in a lot of games this season that are going to be very low scoring, and I think they're going to really have to rely on their running games, right? Miles Sanders coming over from the Philadelphia Eagles. I think he's primed to have a pretty good season for this Carolina Panthers team. And we talked about this when we did the AFC South and some of the other divisions that have rookie quarterbacks and they really have strong running games. And how would you take some of the pressure off of these rookie quarterbacks by having a good, strong running game? I think it starts here with Miles Sanders and some of the depth that they do have for the Carolina Panthers. But for Bryce Young, I know, we talk about his body frame, that maybe it's not the typical NFL quarterback body that we do see. Maybe there's going to be some growing pains. So maybe there might be a lingering issue that might happen or an injury that may happen with him. But I feel like at least in the first year, there may be some growing pains here for Bryce Young. And I thought this number was really high for Bryce Young. So I'm taking the under 3,450 and a half passing yards for Bryce Young for this upcoming season here, Rod.
So, I mean, it's going to correlate right into another one of my player props. So I fully back you on this one because, like you said, it's when you put that much pressure on these guys, and that's such a high number. I mean, Desmond Ritter's at 2,600, right? And this is his second year, but he's still a young quarterback. You expect a guy to come in and just shoulder the load on a team that is used to having a good running game, right? Christian McCaffrey was a staple there for so long. They leaned on him. They had Cam Newton, who still, was a running quarterback as well. Bryce Young probably factors to be a little more mobile than I think a lot of people are giving him credit for. So, I agree with you, and I'll piggyback off of that in my second player prop.
Chris, thoughts on Bryce Young?
I mean, you guys laid it out. I'm not going to regurgitate everything you said, I'll just say this. If Bryce Young ends up with, what was the number,
3,450 and a half. So 3,500 essentially.
If he finishes with 3,500 yards, he'll be in the top 15 quarterbacks in the NFL, which is a lot. Like Rob was saying, just asking him to do that much in his first year in a totally new situation. So there's no way I could play this number being that high. I'm with you.
All right, let's get over to player prop number 2 here. Rod, why don't you lead us off, because you said it correlates very nicely with the under on Bryce Young here.
It does, and I found a number that, look, I know that Miles Sanders' rushing number is somewhere around the 925. I think you can find it. I think it's maybe a little bit more than that, but I found on FanDuel for Miles Sanders to have 1,000 or more regular season rushing yards at plus money, at plus 135. For Miles Sanders to have over 1,000 yards rushing. Now, that's probably because a lot of people think Bryce Young is going to come out and throw the ball all over the place, right? And to be that guy that throws for 3,500 yards. But I don't think that's going to happen. And again, because it's not that I don't think he's talented enough to do it, but that's a big number to hit. And that's a lot to put on a rookie quarterback. he's going to need to lean on Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders just came off of a 1,200-yard season with the Eagles, right? I get it's a different situation. I know it's not the same. But when you look back at what the Panthers did last season rushing, Dante Foreman had 914 yards on 203 carries. Dante Foreman, that's not Miles Sanders. That's Dante Foreman. Again, I know the situation is different, but this is a young quarterback. This is somebody that is going to need to lean on his veteran running back, right? Christian McCaffrey on his way out, 393 yards. Chuba Hubbard, 466 yards, right? So that team ran for well over 1,000 yards last season. So that tells me this is still a running team. They brought in Miles Sanders, who is a running back, right? For him to get 1,000 yards, I don't think that's even going to be a question. And the fact that it's plus money to get him 1,000 yards, because you could bet on his over at -110, that's fine. But why not just say if he's going to get 925, he's going to get 1,000, right? And take that chance and double your money on it. So again, like you said, I don't know that Bryce Young is going to be able to get the bulk of what he needs to get. He's got Thielen, right, which is okay. He's got DJ Moore, or not DJ Moore anymore. He's gone DJ Chark on the other end of that. And again, these aren't 1,000-yard receivers. These don't scream 1,000-yard receivers. Maybe Adam Thielen to a certain extent, but where are the other 2,400 yards coming from? Are they coming from Jonathan Mingo? Are they coming from Terrence Marshall, Laviska Shenault? Like, where are they coming from? So again, I think that Miles Sanders is going to be a much bigger part of this offense, especially early on. 1,000 yards, easy. Plus money, even better.
I mean, you take a look at some of the pass rush efficiencies that they're going to face for the upcoming 2023 season. Falcons, you get twice. They're ranked 25th coming into this season. You have the Seattle Seahawks ranked 24th. Detroit Lions, 27th. Texans, 26th. Chicago Bears, 30th. Green Bay Packers, 31st. So that's already almost half of your schedule where you're facing rush defenses that are ranked well below league average for this upcoming season. I didn't also make this point coming into going back to Bryce Young. This wide receiving group is ranked 31st out of 32 teams for this upcoming season. And I think that one thing that also helps with the Miles Sanders prop is that the Carolina Panthers offensive line ranks number 11th coming into this season. So that's one of their strong positional units for this upcoming season as well. So, and you take a look at Bryce Young, and I know we're talking about Miles Sanders here, but they have a gauntlet of a schedule to start the season. So, again, for a guy that's done it more times than not and had a great offensive line last year with the Philadelphia Eagles, I think that he should be able to do this again. Again, we're only asking him to get 1,000 here, especially add plus money here. So I co-sign that here with you, Rod. Chris, thoughts on Miles Sanders?
Yeah, another cosign here as well. You just take a look back at just not like at the last couple of years, but just in general, even the couple of years that he ran in 2021 when he was playing for the Eagles. I mean, he only played 12 games and still got, like really close to this number, 857 and 750 as well. So, you give him the extra games. Now, of course, we have 17 games instead of 16. And I think this number is, completely doable. Also, you look at his average. This dude, he goes out there and gets big chunks at a time. Career average of 5 yards per carry, and that's what you're looking for if you're looking for 1,000-yard rusher. So I would only be able to agree with you guys on this one.
All right, before we get over to Chris's player prop number 2 here, we are officially 2 days away from August almost being over. You guys know what that means. Time is running out for you to draft your fantasy football teams over on Underdog Fantasy. Get championship ready for your home league by trying out Best Ball on Underdog Fantasy. All you have to do is do one live snake draft, no waivers, no trades. You set it, forget it, and Underdog does the rest. Try it out with Underdog's Best Ball Mania Tournament, the largest fantasy football contest of all time, with $15 million of total prizes up for grabs, including an absurd $3 million going to the winner. Do you have what it takes to win it all? The time is now. The last day to draft your fantasy football team is September 7th. Visit UnderdogFantasy.com or find them in the App Store and sign up with promo code SGPN to get your first deposit doubled up to $100. Again, that's Underdog Fantasy, promo code SGPN. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. And we're also brought to you by the SGP Patreon. Make sure you check out the SGP Patreon. Sign up for the Patreon to get access to exclusive contests, including the NFL Win Totals contest with a $1,000 first place prize. This week's Patreon pick'em is all in week 1 of college football. The Patreon is a great way to support the network and fight back against corporate gambling. To get all the details, go to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/Patreon. Again, that's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/Patreon. All right, Chris, take us over to player prop number 2, my man. What do you got?
So let's go wide receiver. we talking about unders. Let's just keep going with him. I'm looking at Mr. Mike Evans, who I love. I love Mike Evans a lot. He's one of my favorites, one of my favorite wide receivers in the league, and really cool, interesting story about just his life in general. I really like Mike Evans' story and everything that he is. But the player prop is the under. I'm going under on his touchdowns. The number is 5.5, and I love that I can get this at plus money. It's plus 105 over on Caesars. I checked just a few hours ago, and it's for a couple different reasons. So last season, you look at this Tampa Bay offense, and they struggled. 25th in yards per play, 25th in points scored per game, and you lose arguably the greatest quarterback of all time. Most people would say in Tom Brady, and replacing them with Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask it won't be the same. Let's just say it won't be the same. I don't think it'll be the same at all. You look at what Mike Evans did last year. He had just 6 touchdowns with Brady. And of course, we asked him to replicate that this year. You also got Chris Godwin in there that's going to compete for yards and touchdowns as well. A quote that came out from the offensive coordinator in training camp said that this Tampa Bay team will focus on running the football and getting back to that brand of football just a tad bit more. And then you just look at some of his numbers. He averaged just 4.8 catches and 65.5 yards per game before he had that big Week 17 performance where he had 10 catches for 207 yards to kind of go over his projected yards mark last year. And that's what kind of happened with Brady. It would be big games, and it would be, not so big games. Then you take a look at Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield has really struggled to get his wide receivers a lot of touchdowns, right? So going back to the 2020 season, that was Baker's last full season. He threw 17 touchdowns, but none of his wide receivers had more than 6. Kareem Hunt actually had 5 at the running back position. Then you fast forward to the next year, 2021. He played 14 games. He threw 17 touchdowns again. None of his wide receivers had more than 4. You go back to 2019, where you'll find a wide receiver actually go over this number. And it was Jarvis Landry who actually had 6 on the dot. And he played in all 16 games, to be able to clear this number. So for all of those reasons, I like Mike Evans to go under. I want to say one more thing. He also, I checked yesterday, he actually is dealing with a groin injury as well. We never wish, prolonged injuries on anybody, but if we know that there's an injury that can kind of linger in the NFL, it's definitely those lower leg ones, like a groin. So, well wishes to Mike Evans this year. I just need him to stay under 6 touchdowns, and I think he'll do that this year. So give me the under 5.5, Munaf. Like I said, over on Caesars, you can get it at plus money, plus 105.
Well, you asked for all the well wishes, and I'm going to have to need all those well wishes for Mike Evans because I took the over on his receiving yards for this upcoming season at 850.5. Now, you take a look at this number. He's gone at least 1,000 in every single season in his career, right? And again, like you talked about, Chris, that it's been the quarterbacks that he's kind of had throughout his career, right? Jameis Winston, we know that he can sling it. Tom Brady, he had him for the 2 years there. Obviously, I think for sure is the greatest quarterback of all time. I think that at least for this upcoming season, I feel like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to be playing from behind a lot. And that's only going to propel them to throw the football. And that's where guys like Chris Godwin and Mike Evans do come in. So let's hope that he's not getting the touchdowns because it seems like that Baker Mayfield likes to distribute the football to, all the skill position players that he has, including the running back position. You mentioned it, right? Kareem Hunt, when I believe that he was with the Cleveland Browns. Jarvis Landry was only able to get 6, but there's I think enough weapons on this Tampa Bay Buccaneers team that Baker Mayfield would distribute that football and not really go to Mike Evans, because we know historically he is a big target in the red zone. But I think that, yeah, this might be a season where we may not get a full year from Mike Evans. I think that if he plays in the realm of 12 to 14 games, he can definitely still get over this number of his receiving yards. But I mean, for a guy that's done it every single season in his career, and we know about the injuries that he's also dealt with throughout his career. It hasn't been, 1 year or 2 years. I think there's been something always lingering with Mike Evans, but he's always performed at a very high level, at least getting the yardage. And again, I also do agree about the touchdowns here as well, because again, when you talk about Baker Mayfield, like I mentioned, he likes to distribute the football. It seems like he doesn't have a favorite target when he's playing at the quarterback position. So, like you mentioned, right, Chris Godwin is still there. You have guys coming out of the backfield for this team as well. So, yeah, I agree about the Mike Evans one, and I'm going to go with the over 850.5 receiving yards for a wide receiver that's done it every single year in his career. And again, like I mentioned, I think the key handicap for me is going to be that the Buccaneers are going to be playing from behind a lot this upcoming season, where their win total, I believe, is only at 6.5 for this upcoming season here. Rod, thoughts on generally Mike Evans for the upcoming season, both his receiving yards and touchdowns, Rod?
I think they both could hit. I think both of you guys could hit this mark, and very easily at that. But could you imagine Mike Evans in like Tom Brady's prime? Like if Tom Brady and I feel like Mike Evans has been wasted.
Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams X.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like Mike Evans has been wasted on so many good bad quarterbacks. But yeah, I definitely think both of those could hit. And really, honestly, they're going to need Mike Evans. They really will. They need him to be able to catch the ball well, and they need him to be able to play well to get this team through a rough patch.
Rod, take us over to player prop number 3, my friend. What do we got?
It would not be me if I did not turn to a defensive stat, and I'm going to take the Honey Badger, right? Tyrann Mathieu. His interception total is at 2.5. What? I mean, listen, I'm taking the over on this one. This is my over. This is my optimistic over on the Honey Badger getting at least 3 interceptions, because he has done so in each of his last 4 seasons. 2019, he had 4. 2020, he had 6. 2021, he had 3. Last year, he had 3. So even in the most dire of circumstances with the Saints, right? It was a not good Saints team, but he still managed to get 3 interceptions playing all 17 games. The dude's a beast. And listen, we talked about that youth movement, right, at quarterback for this division. He's going to be facing guys like Ritter. Now, Ritter didn't throw an interception last season, believe it or not. If you look back, it's strange to think he didn't throw many touchdowns, but he didn't throw an interception either. But he gets Baker Mayfield. Holy cow, Baker Mayfield. That's like the piñata that just keeps giving. As far as interceptions are concerned, 8 interceptions last season, 13 the year before in 14 games. He threw 8 interceptions, Baker Mayfield, in 12 games last season. 8 in 16 with the Browns, 21 in 2019, 14 the year before that. I mean, granted, he may not throw that many there, but Kyle Trask is there. Kyle Trask is a young quarterback. He'll throw some interceptions. Bryce Young, you got to think you're baiting that rookie into throwing some interceptions to you. And he gets what, 6 cracks at those guys? Yeah. I mean, that's an easy, he should probably do that within the division, get 3 interceptions. That should be the prop, not just overall. But yeah, I definitely like him to get his 3 interceptions this year, at least, if not more. But you can find this one at minus 125. It's juiced a little bit, but that's because I don't know why they set if they set it at 3.5, I might balk a little bit, and I might take the under on that one, because he's had exactly 3 in each of the last couple of years. But you set this at 2.5. Again, he's had some pretty rough goes of it in some secondaries that, especially in Kansas City too, that secondary was giving up everything. And he still managed to get 3 interceptions. So I like Tyrann Mathieu to get over 2.5 interceptions at minus 125.
Yeah, I mean, look, when Tyrann Mathieu is healthy, the Honey Badger, I mean, he's going to get the interceptions, right? He's done this in 4 straight seasons, dating back to his days, 3 years that he was with Kansas City, and his first season last year with the New Orleans, I almost said Pelicans there, Chris, but New Orleans Saints for last season. And again, Rod, I think that you nailed the handicap, is that you're facing young quarterbacks within this division, right? You get a crack at Baker Mayfield twice, you get Desmond Ritter twice, you get Bryce Young twice, and that's just within the division. And like I mentioned, when we were talking about the Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, is that a lot of these teams are going to be quarterbacks are going to be playing from behind. Obviously, you have to throw the football, and that only propels you to have more opportunities to intercept the football. So, I mean, he's been a ball hog going back to his days at LSU. So there's no, I'm not going to deny it. Again, the one season that he was there with the Texans, this guy, plays with his heart on his sleeve. There's no question about it. So, yeah, I'm with you, man. At 2.5, needing 3, it does seem a little conservative here for Tyrann Mathieu, especially the state of this division only, but we still have 11 more games outside of the division that he has an opportunity to get this done. And so, yeah, I definitely am behind you on this one here. Chris, thoughts on Tyrann Mathieu?
Yeah, I think you guys nailed it again. The only thing I'll add is there was a lot of turnover with this Saints secondary. So I don't think a lot of teams going to be scared of them, and they just going to be throwing the ball up there, and that gives them more of an opportunity, right? It's not like it's Revis Allen, from about 5-6 years ago, right? They're going to be testing these cornerbacks, and he's going to come over and be helping and be in the right place at the right time, which is what he has done for the majority of pretty much all his career. Like you said, you can go back to the LSU days, so I would only play this one over as well. Rod also mentioned a great point of just being able to play these young quarterbacks so many times, man. That if you, I don't know how I overlooked this. I didn't see the number, but I think it's perfect, right? Everything kind of goes hand in hand, and young quarterbacks play like young quarterbacks do, and quarterbacks are testing this Saints secondary. This should easily go over the number for you, right?
Chris, take us over to your last player problem, man. What do you got?
So I actually got it over. I got it over, and I'm going back to the wide receiver position. And I'm looking at Chris Olave. That's your guy too,
That's my last player prop as well, man.
Okay, yeah, we always kind of do this, So receiving yards, just at 1,000.5. So we just need him to get, just clear the 1,000 mark. You do want to shop around. It is 1,050.5 over on Caesar. So definitely make sure you're getting the best line. DK is where I saw it. Not really juiced at all, -110. Yep. I just looked at where, what is going to be consistent from last year was a big part of it, So he ranked 21st amongst all wide receivers in targets last year, which he garnered 25.6% of the Saints targets over his 15 games that he did play in. You got Derek Carr coming over, and I kind of went back and looked at Derek Carr's history. He's had at least 1,000-yard receiver in his last 4 seasons. I don't know if I took that out your notepad or not, but yeah, he's had at least 1,000 yard receiver over his last 4 seasons. And Agave, he cleared this last year on just his rookie season, and he had Andy Dalton and Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill throwing him the ball. So I like it a whole lot more. 119 targets in his rookie year, 72 receptions, and only his first season. And I kind of thought about Michael Thomas being the biggest threat. But in my opinion, this guy, not even my opinion, but he's still injury prone, right? Yeah. His projection is only 650 yards. And he's, like I mentioned at the top of the broadcast, he's only played 10 games in the last 2 years. So plus he's 30 now, and he has those lower body, leg injuries that aren't going to help him at this stage in his career. So for all of those reasons, I really like Chris to go over. The only other point I want to mention, is that there was a meeting, I think, with John Gruden and some of the head coaches and general managers, and he said that Derek Carr does his best work when he's not chucking the ball down the field, but when he's playing in the middle of the field, right? Comeback routes, slants. Yeah. And if you go back and watch any of the tape, or you remember, any of Chris's catches last year, he's a legit route runner. Like, he's a possession receiver. He runs a lot of comeback routes, a lot of ends. He doesn't mind taking the hit. He has really good hands. He's of course he's fast. He can, run past you as well. So I like that. If I think he goes over the 1,000-yard mark with Derek Carr being there in his first season.
I was really shocked to honestly see this number, Chris, because obviously, like we stated earlier, that this is my last player prop as well. Is everything that you mentioned, right? Like, Derek Carr's had that 1,000-yard receiver 4 straight seasons, 6 out of the last 8 years. He's had that. And again, he got it done last year with the 3 quarterbacks, like you mentioned, for the Saints team. And for Chris Olave in this offense, is going to be exciting to see. I think he's definitely the number 1, right? Michael Thomas is good to see him back on the field, but there's still a chance that he does get traded as well. I think that's always a possibility with Mike Thomas, because that was in the rumor wheel, I want to say last season for Michael Thomas. So and again, this is a division where you don't have the greatest pass defenses. Derek Carr has proven, like you mentioned, that he's had that 1,000-yard receiver in 4 straight years. I think Chris Olave is going to be that guy this upcoming season for him. And I think this is going to be another big year for Chris Olave. So at 1,000 receiving yards, we need 1,001 receiving yard here from Chris Olave. I think he gets it done again. And exactly everything that Chris said is pretty much what I had in my notes as well. So I'm not going to regurgitate everything. Rod, Chris Olave for this upcoming year, what do you think?
So I don't think that this team is going to be as run heavy as it was in the past. I know they got Jamal Williams, and I understand that he's a decent running back in and of his own right. But with Kamara and not nonsense behind them, it's just I don't know that they're going to run it nearly as much as they will. And for Derek Carr, who's 4,000-yard passer in so many of his career years, he could support having Olave over 1,000 yards and still have Michael Thomas somewhere in the vicinity, if not over himself, right? It's not as if he can't support 2,000-yard receivers. It's a tall task to ask, but I think you're right. I think that we're starting to see the shift now. This is becoming Olave's team as far as the receiver position. And what better way to do it than to bring in Derek Carr so that he's young enough to kind of build up that camaraderie too for a little while as well. And we know that Derek Carr absolutely loves himself a number one wide receiver, right? I mean, Devontae Adams, all those years in Fresno State, those two were inseparable. So he needs somebody like that. He didn't find anybody like that in Las Vegas. Really, Darren Waller was about the closest thing he had to it. And Darren Waller got over 1,000 yards. So, yeah, I definitely think Olave stands a good chance of reaching that mark. And, this shouldn't even be close, obviously.
Yep. All right. So that is our last round of player props. One order of business left before we wrap up this episode. That's going to be our best bets for this NFC South division. Rob, why don't you lead us off with your best bet for the NFC South? What do you got?
Well, I think I'll take the Miles Sanders 1,000 regular season rushing yards because I like it. Again, it's at plus 135. It just makes sense to take this 1,000 yards rather than the 925 and pay juice for it. If you're going to invest your money, at least make something at the end of the year that's respectable. So yeah, give me Miles Sanders, 1,000 regular season rushing yards. Again, young quarterbacks, young team. They're going to need to have him go off, and I think he can.
Love it. Chris, best bet?
Give me the plus money one as well. Mike Evans, under 5.5 touchdowns. Like I said, plus 105 over on Caesars. And I just like this. Like I said, they struggled to score last year. I expect them to struggle just a tad bit more losing Tom Brady as well this year. And I think Tampa just struggles, overall. So maybe nobody on this team ends with 6 touchdowns. And hopefully Mike Evans can stay healthy, so he can go over your receiving yards. But just stay under. You can finish at 5 touchdowns, maybe even 4. But let's not get 6.
I love it, man. All right, for my best bet, man, I like all 3 of these. Let's go Chris Olave, man. I just feel like this number is way too conservative. I know Chris co-signs this as well. So, again, we talked about it with Derek Carr having that 1,000-yard receiver 4 straight seasons, 6 out of the last 8 seasons when he's been the quarterback for the Raiders. And I think that Chris Olave, again, is going to be that guy we talked about. We're not sure what we're going to get out of Mike Thomas. If he's number 1, he's going to be able to stay healthy or even be on this team when it comes to the trade deadline in the NFL. But Chris Olave proved it last year. We talked about the quarterbacks that he had last season, 3 different quarterbacks, and he was still able to get it done. Now you have some consistency with Derek Carr at that quarterback position for the Saints. And more times than not, that Derek Carr has been healthy in his career. And again, I think that chemistry is just only going to get better for those two this upcoming season. So, I mean, if your book allows you to ladder this number up, I can definitely see a season where Chris Olave gets 1,200 receiving yards this upcoming season for the New Orleans Saints offense. So my best bet, Chris Olave over 1,000 and a half receiving yards for this upcoming season for the New Orleans Saints. And that is going to wrap up division number 7. 7 down, 1 to go. We have, I believe, the AFC North remaining as our last division. And again, that's probably the most exciting division in my opinion, for this upcoming season. A lot of great talent, a lot of great teams, a lot of great quarterbacks in that division, but that is going to be our last one. So we'll be back around Wednesday for that one. But again, if you haven't already, listen to the previous 6, including this one now, number 7. Go back and do so. Get down on some of these player props with us. Hopefully, we can put some more money in your guys' pockets for this upcoming NFL season. But Rod, anything else we want to mention before we get out of here, my man?
Nope. Just follow me on Twitter at RJ Villagomez. Link in the bio, everything I got going on. NASCAR Gambling Podcast is cooking. Hey, and if you haven't got to the F1 Gambling Podcast, you need to. Cody hit a 28-1 and a 33-1 on the same day on the same card. We are dishing out some heaters over on the F1 Gambling Podcast, so make sure you go check that out. A lot of fun, a lot of good racing still left in the season. So, if you want a little break from the NFL, I know it's a big chore, but get over there to the NASCAR Gambling and the F1 Gambling Podcast.
He said they're starting to cook. I mean, what's left now to hit 100-1? I mean, Jesus, that day comes. I don't know, man. But yeah, they are barbecue chickening over there for the NASCAR and the F1. So definitely check them out if you want more winners. Chris, anything else we need to mention before we get out of here, my man?
Nah, not at all. Like you said, just follow me on Twitter at Crispy Cap'n, 2 P's, 2 N's. Pleasure doing the show with you guys as always. Looking forward to what is it? AFC North.
AFC North for our final division, North, at least for season-long player props.
Yeah, for season-long player props, man, coming up soon. Like you said, hopefully we gave out some winners, man. I love that we are, kind of bouncing ideas off each other. We do our own homework. We come together and they all kind of align. So hopefully we're, all reading the board well.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So like I mentioned, 7 down, 1 to go. And then next week we'll come up with something fun before the season starts. And then before we know it, Thursday night football, week 1 between the Lions and the Chiefs will be here. We'll give out our player props for game 1. And of course, we'll be on regular schedule for the regular season. You can follow me on Twitter at SportsNerd824. Also make sure to follow the NFL Gambling Podcast, of course, and the Propcast here as well. If you haven't left us a rating and review, please do it and go do so for us. We greatly appreciate it, whether you listen on Spotify, whether that's on Apple, or whether you watch us live on YouTube. And again, make sure to subscribe to the NFL Gambling Podcast on YouTube if you haven't done it already. We'll be going 6 days a week during the regular season between player props, game picks, recap show, looking ahead to lines. It's going to be a lot of fun. So hopefully we do make some more money this upcoming season on the Propcast and also the NFL Gambling Podcast. All right, we'll be back on Wednesday for our last division of season-long player props. Till then, good luck with your picks. Let's break these books off and let it ride.